The South African Council of Churches wrapped up a special meeting of the National Church Leaders Forum. The leaders of member churches converged to discuss the direction that South Africa's political landscape is headed. Let's now welcome on the line Archbishop Thabo Makgoba, who is the chairperson of the SABC, for more on this. Bishop Makgoba, what a pleasure having you with us, so welcome. What has been your current observation as the council on the political climate in the country, and what came out of your recent special meeting in this regard?
Thank you so much, Alicia. Our assessment is premised on a positive view of South Africa. We know that as a country we've been through a lot, and the church has brought God by the scruff of God's neck into our context, and our context into God. And so there is no sense of panic, but there's a sense of urgency that post the elections, we need to give politicians space to reflect on what type of government they want to bring for the South African populace, but equally to say to them, as they do that, as faith communities or as the churches, we know that there are certain values that are very critical, values of inclusivity, values that ensures that the poorest of the poor are not in the margins and ignored, and the values of peace and stability and the flourishing of all South Africans. So in broad strokes, those were some of the issues that came from our meeting.
Bishop, how important is the role of the church, particularly when we're moving towards this diversification of a government, you think? Do you think you need more in terms of some of the points that you've mentioned here in terms of holding certain ethics as well as values by these politicians and holding them to account in this regard?
Alicia, I fully agree with you. Our task, not as politicians, but our task, bearing in mind that the majority of those politicians are people of faith. They worship in a mosque, they worship in a temple, in a shul, they worship in a church. And when they go into the political space, they become incongruent with what their faith teaches them. So we want to hold their feet onto the fire to say, don't be schizophrenic, if I may borrow that term. And when you are in political office, you do something else. And when you are in church, you do something else. The values that you want seen in your church, the values that you want to see in your family, should be the values that you bring into public office. And that is why the church cannot and dare not run away from that space. It's part and parcel of our vocation. We did it in bringing apartheid down because it was evil, it was discriminating God's people. Now, if politicians, for example, in this new dispensation or now, steal from the poorest of the poor, it is an injustice, and the church must speak out and speak up.
Mm-hmm. Now, noting very well, Archbishop, that you are not a politician, but what are some of your current views about this government or proposed government of national unity, which is being brought forward by the ANC versus a coalition that most people had, I suppose, anticipated? And do you think we're currently at a stage where we can actually now embrace this type of governance this time around?
I'm glad, Alicia, you started with a disclaimer that I'm not a politician. I think what we need to do is just to give the politicians the space to think about South Africa first and South Africans, to look at the challenges that we are facing as South Africans, not to be dictated to by big business only and profits, but to think of that auntie in Nkandule who, if it's raining, the bridge is overwhelmed by water and she can't go and buy groceries for her grandchildren who have to go to school. So I think that should characterize this coalition. In 1994, there was Government of National Unity, so it's not a new thing. And when there was a call after Phala for the president to step aside, I think the churches did say perhaps a respectable person should be appointed and a government of national unity appointed. So the aim really just to move away from giving a political solution is South Africa is beautiful, South Africans must be respected, and the needs of all South Africans, particularly the unemployed youth, must be at the center, and we should not be dictated to by the markets only, by those who prefers wars, and by those who do not want South Africa to be integrated.
Interesting that you make that analogy there, Archbishop, about that woman who cannot access anything because of the floods. Because, I don't know, maybe you are gifted in foresight, because I wanted to ask you this. A lot of people in different parts of the country have been devastated by floods as well as heavy rains and inclement weather. What is the church's call as well as message to them at this stage, Arch?
The church's call, and in fact the leaders also reflected on that aspect. We know some people may talk about climate change, and some people may talk about the weathers at this time. But the painful thing is when such happen, those that do not have means to mitigate against the impact of such weathers are the poorest of the poor, and they are left devastated. So what the church, from the reports that we've heard, has been doing is the Salvation Army, the Dutch Reformed Church, and the other churches have gone to different parts of the country to do what we do best, to feed those that have been displaced by these floods, to pray and console those that have lost their loved ones. And then we are in it for the long haul, because once the flood subsides, we will have to knock at the government's door and say, those that do not have accommodation, please accommodate them. And some of our churches, I hope they will do that. And then tomorrow we've called for all the churches to focus on this seventh administration, but more importantly, to focus on those affected by the floods and to do something practical in order to help them.
And in closing, a very quick one, Arch. I mean, in your recent meeting there, have you taken your resolutions or undertaken by the SACC to the political leaders in terms of just voicing out some of the stance by the churches?
Yes, we have delegated our acting general secretary to say the church is in every corner of our society. It is accessible more than some of these political formations. And should there be any need for the church to be involved with the politicians as a bridge, sorry, I'm talking about a bridge when the bridges have been overwhelmed by the floods, but as a bridge, we're willing to do that. But the critical thing is safety, peace, stability, the future of South Africa, and ensuring that those that are in the periphery of society are not ignored. So, Reverend Molom, who is our acting general secretary, will communicate with some politicians, some trade union members, and others to see where our resolutions can find a home as we encourage the politicians to form the seventh government.
Such an honor. Thank you so much for those wise words and your input this afternoon. That is Archbishop Thabo Makgoba, the chairperson of the SACC, giving us the church's stance in the proposed government of national unity.